Our daily chronological devotional from Heart of the Shepherd continues today with our scripture reading, Ezekiel chapter 48. I've titled this devotional, He That Is Mighty Watches Over Israel. Will you allow me for a moment a personal note? Our scripture reading today marks the end of our study of the prophecies of Ezekiel, the prophet of God, to the children of Israel living in Babylon. I want to, on a personal note, thank you for taking this journey with me. I pray that my effort to write a daily commentary on this prophetic book has been a blessing. Of course, your comments and encouragement are welcome, and I hope you will share Bible studies from Heart of a Shepherd with others. Well, Ezekiel 43 returned to apportioning the promised land among the 12 tribes of Israel in the Millennial Kingdom. Now, the prophet, you'll remember, recorded the borders of the land of Israel in Ezekiel chapter 47 and verses 15 through 20. Now, the westernmost boundary was the Mediterranean Sea, of course. The northern boundary of Israel in the millennial began with the Mediterranean Sea in the west and reached eastward to Damascus, chapter 47, and verses 15 through 17. Now, the eastern boundary, we were told in verse 18, was the Jordan River. The southern border, located south of the Dead Sea, followed a river westward to the Mediterranean Sea. Then consider with me then, again in chapter 47, that instructions were given for dividing the land among the sons of Joseph, and Joseph being the father of two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were numbered among the 12 tribes, remembering that the tribe of Levi was chosen by the Lord to serve him as priest to Israel. And so the descendants of Ephraim and Manasseh will each receive a portion of the land in the Millennial Kingdom according to chapter 47 and verse 14. That brings us to Ezekiel 48, and here we have the division of the land in Messiah's kingdom. Well, faithful to his promise, the Lord promised to gather the 12 tribes of Israel from the world's nations and restore them, the Jews, to their land in his millennial kingdom. Then consider with me verses 1 through 7, the 7 tribes north of the sacred district. The sacred district, remembering, contained in Jerusalem and the temple in the millennial kingdom. And so noted are the 7 tribes north of the sacred district. Well, beginning with the tribe of Dan in the northernmost point, and then reaching southward, the first 7 tribes were assigned their portion in chapter 48 and verse 1. To the south of Dan, the northernmost tribe was Asher in verse 2, followed by Naphtali in verse 3. Next to Naphtali was Manasseh in verse 4, and then south of Manasseh was Ephraim in verse 5. Then the tribal land of Reuben was south of Ephraim in verse 6, and next to it was Judah in verse 7. And then consider with me the central land that was dedicated to the Lord. Chapter 48 and verses 8 through 22. Now we read in verses 8 through 9 how the Lord was set aside the central land of Israel to serve as the location of the temple and the city of Jerusalem. Now the portion assigned to the Levites, we read in verse 13, will border Judah's southern border. The priest portion will lie north of the city, but south of the land assigned to the Levites. The south of the priest's land will be New Jerusalem in verse 15, described as a profane place, which really means a common or not a holy land. The New Jerusalem will be described, or is described, as 9 miles square with houses and suburbs, which means really open spaces for pastures within its borders, verses 15 through 17. There will also be land for farming to provide food unto them that serve the city, verse 18. Verse 19, workers representing the 12 tribes of Israel will reside in and serve the city. Again, in verses 21 through 22, we meet the prince of the land, whom we have identified as Jerusalem's administrator. He will be assigned a portion of land to the east and west of the sacred district. And then we come to the 4 tribal lands south of the central land, verses 23 through 28. Now, lying south of Jerusalem's sacred district will be land for the tribe of Benjamin, verse 23, Simeon, in verse 24, Issachar, verse 25, Zebulun, verse 26, and finally Gad, the southernmost tribe, verse 27 and 28. Now, Ezekiel 48 and verse 29 reminded Israel that the land determined, or that rather the Lord determined the division of the land. And then we find the gates of Jerusalem in verses 30 through 35. Now, the Jerusalem of the Millennial Kingdom will have 12 gates. Now, each will bear the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, verse 30 through 34. The circumference of the city will be 35.8 miles, or about 9 miles square. Notice also that the name of the New Jerusalem will be changed, for it will be called Yahweh Shammah, which means the Lord is there. Well, closing thoughts for our conclusion of this wonderful prophetic book known as Ezekiel. Now, for some, the boundaries and the geographical boundaries, locations rather, of Jerusalem and Israel in the Millennial Kingdom may seem unimportant, but nothing could be further from the truth. And the locations given to each tribe serve as a legal transaction between Yahweh and his people. Now, no nation or people today may lay perpetual claim to those lands, for they have been given to the 12 tribes as an inheritance. Let me say that again. This is important. In a day in which there's war and fighting in Israel and Gaza and Hamas and Hezbollah and all the Muslim nations that border on Israel, we as Bible believers have the accurate statement, the accounting of the transaction between the Lord, the God of eternity, and Israel. No nation or people in our day may lay perpetual claim to the lands that God has given to the 12 tribes as an inheritance. What a great inspiration for the Jews who were living in Babylon and to the other tribes scattered after the Assyrian captivity. They were promised that they would one day receive their inheritance. There will come a day when the Lord will draw the 12 tribes of Israel out of the nations and bring them home. That day is yet to be, but the promise of Emmanuel, which means God with us, will be perpetual. For the glory of the Lord will dwell forever amid his people. What a glorious day that will be. Oh, my friend, he that is mighty still watches over Israel. Well, thank you for being a part of Heart of a Shepherd as we conclude this great study of the book of Ezekiel. Bye-bye.